Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Education Subcommittee. We're going to get started. We have two bills in front of us today. The first we're going to take up is House Bill 83. We have this bill and it will be amended. Alice, you want to tell us what House Bill 83 does?
Yes, so as it came in, House Bill 83 requires an annual safety review, evaluation, or exercise for electric retractable room partitions, and requires that the State Department of Education disseminate model safety guidelines regarding the operation of those partitions to each school. This bill is being amended to require the State Department of Education to conduct a thorough review and evaluation of the current equipment that's used throughout public schools in the state, the current procedures surrounding those partitions, and to modify any necessary regulations and to report back to the General Assembly. Unfortunately, the amendment is not yet totally prepared, but it should be shortly and will be by today's voting session.
Okay, that's the amendment to the bill. Do I hear a motion on the bill? Any questions on the bill?
Move favorable on the amendment.
So probably move
Second.
Seconded. Thank you. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? On the bill as amended.
Move favorable.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Perfect. Thank you, everyone. All right. So now we'll go to House Bill 522, the reprint, which everyone should have in front of them. And I would just want to thank everybody for the great discussion that we had last night and for us all taking a breath and getting to a point where we can digest this bill and the amendment. So we're going to start from the top and have Alice walk through pretty quickly the amendments, the changes, and then we're going to have discussion after each section. Okay. And I do want to keep the discussion. Please be quick and thorough on the discussion. I will ask the advocates to do the same. And just advocates, if you have any questions during the conversation, just raise your hand and I'll call on you after the delegates have asked their questions. So Alice, you want to start from the top and not explaining the bill, obviously, but just explaining what we're changing.
From yesterday. Yes, absolutely. So the first thing that's changed, which unfortunately wasn't changed in the reprint I sent you, but I missed it, is to remove the requirement in the training that of the specialized curriculum, what conduct is generally disciplined and what is generally prohibited under the Student Code of Conduct. The next, so that's on page 2 of the bill of the reprint. The next thing that's changed is that the requirement for an SRO, they no longer have to have an exemplary disciplinary record that does not include a finding of excessive force, merely that their disciplinary record does not have a finding of excessive force because there was a belief that exemplary was not a term that was universally known. Additionally, the assignment no longer has to be approved by the local school system. Instead, it has to be, we removed that section, and instead, jointly, the local school system and the local law enforcement agency shall jointly assign the SROs to the schools. So that's on that page. Additionally, you'll notice here that the principal is no longer required to adopt this behavioral health and safety action plan. Rather, a school system must come up with a plan. School must come up with a plan, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But is that a good place to stop? Are there any questions?
Yes, please. Yeah. Are there any questions?
Yeah, where are we in the reprint, please? I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
I'm trying to.
Where are we?
Sorry, everybody. We're on page 3 of the reprint. Should be. So changes are on page 2 of the bill. We remove number 7. Let's talk like that, Alistair.
Okay.
Page 2 of the bill. Number 7 we removed. We felt that it wasn't necessary, so we removed that piece.
Sorry, I'll send another reprint because that part didn't make it in. So One sec, guys, sorry.
Well, and then on page 3 of the bill, it should have on lines 19 through 20, exemplary disciplinary records should be removed because it's not defined anywhere. So we remove that piece. That should be removed when the reprint is not removed, but that should be removed. Also on this reprint, it should say where.
Yeah, sorry. I think the wrong reprint got sent. I apologize about that. So
Okay.
let me resend that really quickly.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, because I was about to say, I don't see those changes in here.
Yeah.
This is the fourth time I need to go buy some environmental credits. This is the fourth time I've printed this. I need to go
I
do
know,
something
me too,
to make
man.
this right.
Me too. But just to go over it, everything that Alistair said, we've agreed to, and it should be in the reprint. We want jointly agreement on assignments for SROs, so the school system and the local law enforcement agency will work together to assign SROs to schools. And we did change it so that the principals no longer have to do the behavioral health and behavioral health and safety plan. That's all. You'll see more in that later in the reprint of how that's done at the school. And we did add language about template, but we'll get there too.
Well,
Hold on one second. Let's wait till we send that document around, just so we're all working from the same document.
Did you guys get it? I just resent.
I have it.
This is the small advantage of not working in person, is that would be a much bigger pain to print out again.
Yep.
Yeah, Delegate Jones, you weren't here then, but that would be another 15 minutes.
Nope. I know. Yeah. I remember in the 90s, it was a slow process. Can I just say something quickly, because we passed a section I wanted to make sure, because y'all you're talking about, it looks like you are on like page 4 for the behavioral health plan that you just talked about. I wanted to go back quickly to there was some talk in section C regarding physical injury and
Delegate Jones, we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah,
we haven't. Okay, just making sure.
Okay, so we'll get to that point. And so, Alistair, let's start from the top.
Okay.
Of this reprint, and let's talk about where the sections are that we're changing to.
Okay, so on page 2 of the reprint, the first thing that's changed is removing that having to study student discipline as part of the training. You'll see why that's removed a little bit later. Okay. Then on page, sorry.
Hey Sam, can you mute Delegate Guyton?
Then on page 3, rather than having to have an exemplary disciplinary record, because that term was undefined, school resource officers now just have to have a disciplinary record that is free of excessive use of force. And additionally, the principal is no longer required to approve the school resource officer. Instead, beginning in August 15th of this year, the local law enforcement agency and the local school system shall jointly determine the assignment of the school resource officer. Additionally, as we discussed, the school behavioral health and safety action plan no longer has to be developed by the principal, but just by the school. Okay to move on?
Yes, any questions on that section? That section, none, seeing none, let's go to the next.
Okay, so the next thing is now, so now we're in subsection C on the second part of page 3. A school resource officer is now prohibited from enforcing the school's student code of conduct unless 1, a physical injury with an imminent threat of serious harm has occurred, or 2, to prevent an imminent threat of serious harm to other students or staff that cannot be reduced or eliminated through other interventions and supports. And additionally, a school administrator or official or school safety coordinator may not direct a school resource officer to enforce the student code of conduct unless those 2 conditions are met. So that was a change.
So this is section C on page 3, the second page of page 3.
Okay.
And so let's discuss this section a little bit because I know there's been some questions about it. So Delegate Holmberger, first question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in this instance, I'm just trying to think of hypothetical scenarios type thing. Drugs are a big problem in some of the schools. And, so I'm envisioning someone trying to take an act of destroying drugs or flushing them down the toilet or doing something like that. That's obviously not a physical harm thing, but could get into evidence. So could an officer intercede in that?
Yeah, I think criminal law is not going to be trumped here. So
Okay,
if someone is committing a crime, that's still going to be dealt with under normal policing powers. This is just pertaining to.
Yeah, so this would be more like I saw a student cheating off of another student. As the officer, I'm not going to get involved in that.
Exactly.
Great, thank you.
Delegate Smith.
Actually, I want you to continue with everyone else because I was at the last part, but by the time I wanted to say something, you had moved on. So I'll let you continue with the train of thought here.
Got it. Thank you, Delegate Smith. Delegate Palagovich-Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually got some feedback this morning from a juvenile public defender about this section. And actually, I think the revised reprint slightly addresses it, but I'm a little concerned that it's still a little vague in terms of what serious harm would mean. One solution might be to actually tie this to a definition that's already in COMAR of serious bodily harm, because that's something that's already defined and has standards in place. And if we'd be open to that, Alistair, I can actually send you the citation in COMAR.
Funny you should ask, Delegate. So this is language that comes from what this is the tracking the language that we prevent for pre-K through 2 interventions into students. And that language indeed has been adopted, has been further fleshed out in COMAR. But this is already tied to a standard that exists in the code now.
Can you either now or later send me the citation for that? Because I'd like to dive in deeper on that.
Yeah, so a few years ago, we passed legislation prohibiting schools from being able to suspend students from K through second grade, and in that it has this language in there. So we adopted this language. This was also proposed by one of the advocates on the call too, to adopt similar language. But I think we're getting to the same point that you're getting at, Delegate.
Okay.
Miss
Is section 7305.1 of the education article. Delegate Palakovich, guys.
Look at that guy, man. You better know this code. Cool. Okay. Any other questions on this section? Any of the advocates have any questions on this section? Does this satisfy some of the concerns that we heard last night? Seeing none. Thank you, everybody. That sounds great. Look at that, man. We listen, Alistair. Look at that. Delegates on this section, Delegate Jones.
Thank you so much. Last night, I'm looking at the reprint and I just want to make sure that we have covered. Ms. Ortiz spoke up last night regarding enforced discipline related school policies. And it looks like she's on the phone. And if she can see the reprint, does this cover her concerns?
I think this came from her, Delegate Jones. This language was proposed by her in the email.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that, okay.
Okay.
Double backing. Thank you.
I love the thoroughness. Perfect. Thank you. Delegate Smith on a previous section.
Thank you for your indulgence as I manage the tech. The prior section that discusses that the principal and local police agency would jointly decide the assignment of the SRO, that is a bit in conflict with the Baltimore School Police model, which has a chief that makes all assignments. And the fact that there's a memorandum of understanding between the Baltimore City School Police and principals that delineates kind of their relationships. I just didn't know, is there any tightening up we could do there, just because they are consulted, but the ultimate decision rests with the chief of school police.
Yeah, I think we could say that unless otherwise governed by a memorandum of understanding.
And delegate, we did take out principals. We just said a local school system and the local agency. So I think it does cover what you're saying, because it's still, I think under the Baltimore City model, you're saying that it's jointly done at the administrative level.
Not technically jointly, the final decision rests with the school police. Like they're consulted. The schools are consulted. You get what I'm saying? The jointly makes it.
We can add the language about otherwise if it's already done in MOU.
Okay.
If that works. Cool. Okay.
Okay. So the next major change is, additionally, in addition to previously we talked about school resource officers, and I'm still, sorry, on second page of the reprint under C1, the school resource officers are prevented from asking about the immigration status of a student. They're now also prevented from asking about the immigration status of a student's family. Additionally, previously we had a single supervisor in charge of all school resource officers. Rather than that, we are saying that each school resource officer must be assigned a commanding officer, and that is that commanding officer that has to do regular meetings with them in the school system and go through the training. So that way, if there are many school resource officers, there can be multiple commanding officers.
Great. Okay. Any questions on this section? Does that satisfy everybody's questions from last night? Ms. Mansfield.
Okay. Thank you. I believe it does. I believe the term commanding officer would be broad enough if it doesn't specify that. I mean, there can be more than one commanding officer in the chain of command. But could I just double check that? I'll do it right and get back to you as soon as I can on that language. Would that be possible? Or do you want to?
I like the language that's in here, honestly, but Delegate Ebersole, you want to respond to that?
I think almost my understanding from MCSS is that every officer has a commanding officer. I think we're trying to designate someone to be specifically a commander in this area in addition to that.
And if they are the commanding officer, then they have to go through the training.
Right. In other words, they all have somebody who's their commanding officer in general, but this is more. This is somebody who would command that group of people as well. So it sounds like it would be a second assignment of sorts.
Right. I just want to be sure if it is a structure, whereas maybe there is a commanding officer that oversees a unit of SROs, and then there are supervisors underneath. That maybe, I guess, would also be a commanding officer. It just doesn't affect that chain of command. Would be my only question. But thank you. I appreciate the change and working with us on that, though. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rett. Mr. Rett.
Thank you.
I'm learning Spanish, man. So
I know, it sounds good. I like it. I was trying to get my hand up earlier when Delegate Smith was discussing the principles and the joint decision making. It's not so much in the MOU that has the decision making where we consult with the principal. It's like how the superintendent can place a teacher based on need. So it's the chief of police in consultation with the principal will place a school police officer there, but the ultimate decision is with the school police chief and the system. So it's not an actual MOU that dictates that. Our MOU delineates the responsibilities and roles, not placement of staff.
I think this language still fits that, though. It simply says that they must work together to assign the SRO. It doesn't talk about who has a final decision in it.
It does say jointly as of now, so we could change it to shall jointly consult in the assignment.
I don't know if I like that language.
Okay.
I like jointly assign because they both are agreeing to it. But I appreciate what you're saying, Mr. Rett. Can you get me something really fast on what you want us to do here? I mean, the ultimate decision does lie with your chief because you have a unique situation in Baltimore. Other jurisdictions do not. So, I want to make sure that we're clear on this. So
I was just going to say consult with, but I will write something down and send.
Got it. Okay. I mean, we can possibly take that, but I know that in our school jurisdiction, they do not consult with folks, and they do not jointly assign SROs. It's assignments that are done. So just a little different. And I think our major goal here is that there's a conversation happening about these assignments, right? Like, and people are working together to assign SROs to these schools, if this is the route we're going. Julie, Plakovich-Carr.
Yeah, so I just checked the section that Alistair gave me about the serious harm, and
Can we
I'm sorry.
Can we wait until we finish this section a little bit?
Okay, sorry.
Cool. All right. So we went back to the section on principals, that we remove principals. We say jointly assign or jointly work together. We can say something about or shall consult with. Mr. Rett, does that get to your point?
Yes, consult, yes. Shall consult with.
Got it. Okay. And Alistair is reading your suggestion, Delegate Plakovich-Carr. I think he's looking it up right now.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to flag that I did check the section of the article that he mentioned, and it doesn't have a definition of serious harm. So I'm still concerned that this isn't specific enough.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that there was a definition here, just that it exists in the code already, I think. Although I need to read a little bit more carefully to make sure I'm not wrong about the citation here, and that there are regulations interpreting this section that, while not a definition, are helpful in knowing what the context of it is, what the contours of it are, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I guess.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, I guess I'd still like to see those further regulations on that to see specifically like how this is being interpreted or applied. I think before I feel comfortable with what's there. I think what we have now is stronger than what was there, much stronger than what was there yesterday, but I think there's still some room to be more specific.
Sure. I will send you the regulations. Sorry, one sec. But should we continue as?
Yeah, let's continue. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Delegate.
Work on that. Okay, so turning now to the third page of page 3, the next page in subsection D. We've removed the requirement that a school security employee the prohibition against enforcing the disciplinary policies, and instead replaced it with a requirement that a school security employee may not arrest or otherwise detain a student enrolled in the public school that the school security employee works.
Delegate Ebersole, you want to speak to this section for us?
Yes, certainly, if you would like me to. The school security officers are used in a whole bunch of different ways across the state. You and I, Mr. Chairman, have discussed that some counties we have familiarity with, they're used in a much more law enforcement type style. My experience is that they can often be sort of almost disciplinary assistants in the building to administrators who have a lot of other jobs to do in the building at the same time regarding instruction and curriculum. So I felt like perhaps we should loosen a little bit, not treat them as SROs, but I'm very pleased because I felt this was an important part of that they then not have the same sort of skills, not have the same sort of latitude that police officers have in terms of arrests. And what else did you say, Alistair? I forget. Arrests and, say it?
Detention.
Right.
So
yeah, they, there's even talk about, although this could be negotiated between them about them not wearing any sort of uniform and things like that. Principals don't wear uniforms. They don't need to either. So that sort of thing.
What do folks think about this section? Does any of the advocates have any questions about this? Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like clarification. I'm sorry. Clarification. Are there no instances in which the security employee can arrest or detain a student enrolled in public schools if that student brings a gun or is threatening other people? Like, is there no? I'm just trying to understand what would happen in a situation like that.
There'd be an SRO there that would do that in that case. I'm Chair.
Yeah, I think what we're doing here is not defining it as we did with SROs, like making it clear that they aren't leaving it up to the LEAs to decide what their roles are. And because some, as Delegate Ebersol said, there's some that they're essentially behavioral health specialists and helping students. And then in my county, they are essentially law enforcement. And so what we're doing is removing the ability for them to arrest in my county, which is what they do in our county. They arrest students. If there's an arrestable offense, the SRO will be involved in that case. And, and I think that anything that's arrestable offense, I think it would be covered under the current law.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And I think what you just suggested, I wasn't thinking that way, that there would be both an SRO and a school security employee in the school. All right.
Well, there could also be local adequate law enforcement coverage, which is the rest of what most of what the safe
the schools do. Yeah, so there's still local coverage of a school where a police officer can go into the school if there's any need for arrests or any need for law enforcement. There's also SROs already in the schools, but in some schools, like one of my schools, there's an SRO and then there's 14 security personnel.
Oh my God.
So for 2,000 students in a high school. So, and they're arresting kids every day. So that becomes a major issue.
Sure, and I don't disagree with that. I'm just going back to the original intent of the Safe to Learn Act, which was really just to protect schools, not to do all this other arresting, but to protect schools from sort of outside threats and shooters and that sort of thing, and to make sure if something like that happened, that this isn't tying anyone's hands. So that was the
major point of the Safe to Learn Act was for SROs and local coverage too.
If I could real quick, Mr. Chair, I promised 15 seconds or less. SROs were in buildings long before we had multiple mass shootings. We did pass the Safe to Learn Act as sort of a reaction to what happened in St. Mary's County. But SROs are really not going to be capable of, or were not put in buildings originally to protect students in those situations. That's my opinion on that. They're really there to help students.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions on this piece here? Cool. Okay, let's go to the next section. Any advocates have any questions or any comments on what we've heard so far? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let's go to the next section. Alistair.
Yes, so the next amended section, and I believe the last amended section, is subsection H, which is on page 4 of the reprint and continuing on to page 4 also of the reprint, the second part of page 4. So we modified the behavioral health and safety action plan a bit. Rather than having to be developed by a principal, we're now requiring that on or before April 1st of next year, each county board must establish a template for a behavioral health and safety action plan. And the template must have the metrics and concrete steps that we talked about previously. Then a public school beginning on June 1st of that year must develop a plan based on the template. And if there's an already existing plan that fulfills the requirements or that can be made to fulfill those requirements through modification, that may be used rather than developing a new plan. Then the other stuff stays mostly the same. The plan has to be submitted to the county board, who may review it and modify it if necessary and publish on the school's website.
Okay, great. Any questions so far? Delegate Polakovich-Carr.
I think there's a typo based off of what Alistair just said. H1, shouldn't that be April 1st, 2022? I think based on your oral description.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much, Delegate. It'd be difficult to do prior to the enactment date of this bill.
Cool.
Sorry, I should say before this, the County Board of Education had to approve the plan. But now I think when they're the ones developing the template, they just need to review it and make sure that it fits. So it reduces their administrative burden, I think, a little, although it puts it on them at the start.
We also added language that would, I'm not sure if you covered this, Alistair, but that if you have a community schools plan or another plan already in place, you can be able to adopt the other principles within this plan into that plan. Does that make sense? You covered that already, Alistair?
Mentioned it, yes, but maybe in passing.
Got it. Thanks. Okay. Any questions? Comments? Ms. Ortiz.
Good afternoon, Jeanette Ortiz, Legislative and Policy Council. Thank you so much for working with us and considering advocate suggested language to make this bill even stronger. Sorry if I missed it, but towards the end of the reprint, I believe there's a language about the County Board of Education approving a plan. And I think my suggestion is that—
Ms. Ortiz, we just covered that we took out the approved part.
So, oh, you did take out the approved. Thank you. So sorry, totally missed that. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We're listening to you, Ms. Ortiz.
Thank you.
Get lost in our eyes, I think. So
it was a late night last night, so I'm still a little tired. Thank you.
Ms. Delegate Ebersol.
This is a much broader issue, so if you're on something, I don't want to steer away. Let me know when you're—
No, we're at the end, man. So
okay. You know, one of the things that we have, and I don't know if it's too late to work this in, it's just sort of occurred to me, and I'm sorry it's so late, but we talk a lot about adequate law enforcement coverage. Wouldn't it be great if we put something in about adequate mental health and behavioral coverage also?
I don't know that that's the appropriate.
I know.
I think that might be another bill.
Sorry to lob a grenade in the middle. I'll pull it back.
You got it. Okay. You want to talk about taxes in this bill too?
Yeah. How about that? Let's offer a tax break to SROs, shall we?
Thanks, man. Okay, cool. Ms. Mansfield.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize. I want to go back to the commanding officer language really briefly. I think because I have a further clarification, it's fine to use a commanding officer in terms of a unit of SROs or reporting to a commanding officer, because that level is usually a lieutenant. But if there's a supervisory structure that an SRO might report to, and it's usually a supervisor is a sergeant, and a sergeant is not considered a commanding officer. So if there's a structure where you have maybe 30 SROs for a jurisdiction, there's maybe a lieutenant that oversees that unit, and then there might be 2 or 3 supervisors in that structure that oversee and supervise the direct SROs. So in that case, I'm not sure the term commanding officer is the best one to use in that situation, because you're still having that SRO reporting to a commanding officer, which will be the lieutenant, even though there's a sergeant in between there to supervise.
I'm sorry. Hold on one second, sir. Ms. Mansfield, you sent us the language on commanding officer.
Correct, I did, but but the second part, I said the way I sent the language was I used supervisor in the second, and based on, so basically a school resource officer shall designate a commanding officer to whom school resource officers would report. Sorry, my camera just went off. However, but then a supervisor could be designated for those SROs. I used the word supervisor in there, and I think the way the amendment was described, it was overall commanding officer, and then it was also a commanding officer to which the SRO would report and meet regularly with. I think that's where the issue is.
Delegate, Alistair.
Keep demoting me. So I think here, Ms. Mansfield, this is just a term of art in the code. It doesn't necessarily have to reflect the actual employment structure of any local law enforcement agency. All we're trying to get at here is just that there has to be one person who is designated by, or one person per school resource officer designated by the local law enforcement agency that has this supervisory authority. I mean, I think to a degree, it doesn't matter what we call them. So I think
Okay.
we'd probably
As long
be
as-
comfortable with anything, but I don't
Okay.
think it necessarily has to reflect the actual structure of their actual job title and structure in the local law enforcement agency. They just have to be a supervisor of that individual school resource officer.
So let me ask this: is commanding
Okay.
officer, is that it is their commanding officer, not a commanding officer, not a commanding officer in the structure of a police department, right? It's the person who has command over that officer.
I know it says the commanding. I just thinking from a law enforcement perspective, they and their structure and their chain of command, when they, for their purposes, a commanding officer is a rank of lieutenant or higher, and it might be a sergeant that's supervising. But it's the term, if it's a rank, higher or a higher rank than the SRO. That's probably
So,
okay. I understand your point. Okay.
Do you want to, Alistair, what do you think about changing parts of it to supervisor to make it clear? I mean, I'm just a little concerned here.
Yeah, I mean, I think if that's, I think that's fine. I think the goal is to have someone at the local law enforcement agency who is going through this training and who is responsible for making sure that that officer is fitting the proper role in the school. I don't think it necessarily matters what that person's called, but that is, I think, what we want to get at with this portion of this bill.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Any other thoughts, any other questions on this bill? Or an amendment, excuse me. Okay, Delegate Plugger's did we resolve your, oh, there we go. Look, I was, go ahead.
No, Alistair did share the citation with me, but there's no definition. It uses that phrase repeatedly, but it's still not defined. I'm afraid it still leaves too much interpretation for the SRO.
Delegate Plugger's, what are you suggesting?
So COMAR defines a different term, serious bodily injury, that actually has a specific 4-part definition, unlike.
Well, sorry, Delegate, the section I sent you was within this is a definitional section from that chapter of COMAR. So in that chapter, I mean, I think we could say, so I think we could say we could use that definition, but I think by tying this to the definition that's used in code that produced these regulations, I think there is a decent tie there, and I think the intent is that those definitions would be used. But I think if this is, I don't think there would be a problem with using this definition if that's something you want to do. But I'm sorry.
Serious bodily injury, yeah. I mean, I'd feel much more comfortable about that because then it's clear what we're intending with it.
Got it. Okay, cool. Can I ask the question of Ms. Ortiz because she made some suggestions on this language? Ms. Ortiz, do you want to hop in here?
Yeah.
You want to tell us? I think you sent this over the language about
I did.
Serious harm.
Yeah, and so I was just, and when Ms. Dove was speaking last night about tightening up this language, it just, I agreed with everything she was saying. And so I was thinking back to the pre-K to second grade suspension law that this committee passed and the General Assembly passed a few years ago. And so for consistency's purpose, I thought that that would be good language. And it was language from my recollection, and I don't know if anyone else that's on the call, can jump in. There was a lot of conversation about this language and why it was selected. And so I do recall that there was just, a lot of conversation, a lot of back and forth, and a lot of consideration as to selecting this particular language in that law. And so I just thought, for tightening up the language and being consistent across the education article, that it would be a good alternative. Thank you.
So do we need to, so Delegate Plugger's, are you pressing your amendment to make it bodily injury?
I am.
Okay. All right. So we will, is everybody else cool with that bodily injury language? Can I
Sorry,
get a
can
thumbs up?
I ask clarification from the delegate?
Sure,
Are
absolutely.
you, do you want us to say, delegate, serious bodily injury as defined under Comar 08?
That sounds
Okay.
perfect.
Okay. Not just use the phrase, but reference Comar. Okay, sure.
That sounds great. Look at that, man. I love it. All right.
Working together.
Serious bodily injury as defined under Comar. Perfect. Okay. Cool. Any other questions? Any other thoughts on this? Okay. Do I hear a motion on the amendments?
Move the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. All opposed. Great. Okay. On the bill as amended, any discussion?
Move
And
favorable.
it's been properly moved
Second.
and seconded. Any discussion? And I just wanted to just add that we are going to include the language in here about Baltimore, in here about consulting with the school system. Questions, Delegate Hornberger.
Yeah, sorry, I'm multitasking here, so I'm going to miss it. I wanted to bring up the what you talked about earlier in terms of we mentioned that it's kind of a cooperative process when assigning the SRO.
Delegate, I think you're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm having an
Repeat what you
internet
said.
issue here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep.
Okay. We spoke about the assigning of the SRO and how that's a joint process, and that's great. I love that language. However, does a principal still have the autonomy to dismiss an SRO?
No.
Okay. Could you just go over that for me one more time? If there's a, in other words, if the principal or whoever, how does an SRO get changed out or dismissed?
That'll be by their supervisor or during the current process and how it works. I think all we're saying, we completely remove principal in that process altogether. Okay. So that's no longer in there. You won't see that in here, I think, at all anymore. Except for the study or the plan, right? But so all that is taken out, delegate. So right now it will still go through the current process of who removes SRO, and that's their supervisor, and that's that local law enforcement agency. That wouldn't happen from that wouldn't happen by the school system or by the or principal.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarity.
And there's no veto power at all for principals at all in that process.
Great.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts on the bill as amended? Okay, seeing none, it's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ms. Delegate Hartman, I thought you said aye. I heard you say aye, man.
I heard that. I heard it.
I can't hear you, Delegate Hartman. We still can't hear you, Delegate Hartman.
I'm muted, yeah. It's just a lot of the heartburn's been taken away. One of my sheriffs has said, okay, one of them I haven't heard from, and I'm just leery to pull the trigger. If you say no, you can always say yes later, so.
Fair enough. All right, cool. So two
Yeah,
no's.
Just discussion on the vote there. I just wanted to thank the chair for working with the advocates and us. I have one sheriff. I've been texting with him and communicating, and they're okay with the bill now. So, and then in terms of my colleagues, I think they're still waiting for feedback. So from a time sensitive and hold harmless standpoint, we reserve the right to change votes later.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Delegate Rose, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to kind of to echo what my colleagues have said. You know, I do appreciate the work on the bill from the original version. You know, I have talked with my law enforcement, and I appreciate your kind words that, you know, we are doing a really good job in Carroll County, and we're doing a lot of what's in this bill and more, actually. But my overall concern is, you know, are we going to keep chipping away at the SROs? I think they're extremely critical and important. And so, you know, I just, as of right now, you know, I may change my mind, but as of right now, I greatly appreciate the changes to it and the effort put in. Absolutely. My conscience leads me to just vote no at this time.
Thank you. And let me just make something clear to everyone. We're not chipping away at SROs. We're trying to strengthen the process and make sure it's more thorough process. There have been some concerns about SROs and about public safety officials in schools. And so, there's people on both sides of the issue. And so our goal here was to make sure that we strengthen what we have here in the process that we have, and to make sure it's more transparent and that there's a joint process in that, and that we have a plan put in place to make sure that they can do their work that's jointly assigned to, and to make sure there's more behavioral health supports for students, because that's the major issue that happens in our schools that has caused us to be at this point where we're having this discussion. So, I want to just thank Alistair for his hard work in developing these amendments and these changes. And we put a lot of hard work into this bill. It's not perfect, obviously. Still got a lot more work to do. But I appreciate everybody's comments, and I think we took everybody's comments into play here. So thank you, everybody. Delegate Hornberger.
Sorry, one more bite here. Now that we've got some consensus here, if the Sheriff's Association with the reprint, I would just ask if they could get back to us with a yay or nay before we go to full committee, if that would be helpful.
I don't understand what is a request from us, or what's your request, Delegate?
No, I see that we have some of the advocates here on the call. So if they are going to take a position on the reprint now that we've made some changes, hopefully they could get this to us expeditiously.
Got it. Fair enough.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody. Well, I'm sorry. That means the HB 522 has passed. We have 2 dissenting votes, and that's it. Okay. With that said, thank you, everybody, and thank you for your patience. And I'll see you in the voting session.
Has voting started already? I mean, are they there right now?
They're delaying